Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first RMHAM Tech Talk, coming to you live. That's sort of what distinguishes RMHAM Tech Talks from just a million other videos that you can find on the web, is that we're trying to actually do these live and being able to interact with the speaker so you can ask questions, not just passively watch the videos. So thank you to Chris, K0SWE, for volunteering to give our very first Tech Talk. And we look forward to doing these like every month, a couple of weeks after RMHAM University. So between the RMHAM universities, we'll have one of these Tech Talks. We're looking for people who would be interested in getting some of these talks. So if you're interested in talking on some technical topic, please feel free to contact me at my call sign at p0nts.org. Alpha Charlie Zero. Go back at p0nts.org. It's probably the easiest way to get a hold. Without too much further ado, I'd just like to remind you that this is presented to you by Rocky Mountain Ham Radio, which is a 501c3. And as we have a couple of days left in this year, if you have some money lying around that you're trying to get rid of, please keep us in mind. We run a very extensive network of repeaters, as well as infrastructure for other clubs that we use to provide connectivity for them. So there's always a lot of expenses associated with that. And if you were to throw some money our way, we will put it to good use. With that, I'm going to.
The questions can go in chat or audio. Make sure they do that.
If you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat. We'll read the questions as quickly as we can. And you can also come up and unmute your microphone and ask a question there. We will be listening and we will hear you in the studio. So feel free to pop up and ask whatever question you have. Without further ado, Chris, we'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks very much for the introduction. Thanks for inviting me to the inaugural run of RMHAM Tech Talks. This is going to be exciting. So I am your host. My call sign is K0SWE. I've been a ham for just under 2 years. But before that, I spent some time in the Army as a radio and IT technician. So I got some experience with radios there and was very happy to find the amateur radio community to be a very similar environment to that. During the day, I am a programmer and work on some various ham radio programming projects as well. So just some administrative notes. The restrooms are down the hall. The door code, oh, wait. Okay, so it's not that kind of tech talk this time. We have adjusted the format to fit the times. Bear with us. This is meant to be an interactive talk. And so I will definitely need the audience's help in coming up with material. I've got about 30 minutes of prepared material to go through, but I can expand where we need to expand. And even before we get started, I'm interested to hear from 2, maybe 3 people. What would you like to get out of this session on the Kenwood TM-D710? What were you hoping to get from tonight?
How to operate the thing without a PC programmer.
Fair enough, we can do that.
I had to change bands and we couldn't figure out how to do it.
That is surprisingly difficult. It won't do it out of the box. You got to change one of the programmable buttons.
Some information on the digital mode use.
Digital mode use, we can cover that as well. What I'm prepared for is we can cover the AX25 TNC. It will also take an external TNC so that you could do VAR FM, so forth, but I'm not really set up to work on that tonight. But we will definitely cover the AX25 TNC that is built in.
I'd be interested in figuring out how to turn it into a digitator all by itself.
DigiPeter. Okay. I have read about that. I've not experimented with that, but yeah, perhaps I can get some help from the studio or the audience here. Very good. So we can.
In the chat, there was somebody that requested with a PC programmer also.
Okay.
That was in the chat window.
Very good. Well, I've got both. I'm prepared to cover the stock program called MCP-6A, and I'm also prepared to cover Chirp, the programmer that is open source. RT Systems is another popular option. We can at least talk about that.
And then we've also got in the chat, I think there's some interest in cross-banding as well.
And cross-banding too. Great, I'm prepared for that. So yeah, we can cover all of that and more tonight. This is going to be a whirlwind tour of features on this radio. We're not going to be able to get into much depth on any particular feature, but there are lots and lots of videos out there. Use your favorite search engine, use your favorite video site, and you'll be able to dig deeper on any of these topics. The idea with tonight's topic is we just want to get you, hopefully anybody can learn something, whether you're completely new to this radio or whether you've been using it for years. Hopefully we can show you some new feature that you've never used before and get some more use out of it. All right, so let's start off by talking about the radio itself. Welcome to the Kenwood TM-D710. The original model was released in 2007. That was the Alpha or the Echo model. Pretty often you will not see the Alpha. Yes, exactly. Pretty often you'll see those letters dropped because Alpha just means it's for the Americas market and E is for the European market. The features are nearly identical. There's a few changes, but if you're just talking about this in casual conversation, it's pretty typical to just drop the A and the E. In 2013, they came out with the G model, the Golf model, which added a built-in GPS unit, which is extremely useful if you want to do APRS position reporting. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I will say this is an expensive radio for what it is. You know, there's lots of mobile dual banders that are less expensive, but the features in this model really set it above. This is like the gold standard for doing packet radio on the go. All right, so we'll go briefly through the controls on here. I'll mention that I have actually reset all of the settings on this radio. So this is exactly what you would see once you took it out of the box. No, it's, well, either way. All right, so we'll start off with the physical knobs. There's actually 5 of them on this unit. You've got the tuning knob, VFO knob here. Here you've got volume and squelch to control the A band on the left side of the radio here. And you've also got volume and squelch to control the B band on the right side of the radio. It's really nice having physical controls for these. In addition to the knobs, you've got soft buttons. As is pretty typical with radios of this vintage, you've got what the current function of the key is marked on the screen here. So the other thing I want to cover here is there's this key button and this F button. The key button will change the functions of what's on the bottom here. So these are sort of general radio controls. If you go another page, these are related to APRS mostly. And this last page here is related mostly to GPS. The F button here will change the function of pretty much all of these soft buttons, depending on your context. So think of this as like a control key on your computer keyboard. Last but not least, you know, most modern radios hide a lot of their features behind a main menu. So to get to that, you want to hit F and press in on the VFO dial. And you see you get lots of options here. So what I'm demonstrating on tonight is one of the 710G models with the built-in GPS. Most of the features are going to be analogous between these. The only big difference is the layout of this main menu. So if you've got the older model 710, you'll probably have to look in the manual for where some of the menu options are, as opposed to just following me blindly. There's a couple of settings that I like to change right out of the box. Actually, as we mentioned, Doug's question, it is impossible to change, currently we're on the 2 meter band right here. It's impossible to change this to the 70 centimeter band unless you change the function of one of these keys. Let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to go into the main menu, go to this auxiliary menu item, that's menu 900. And I'm going to scroll over. You notice we're changing the menu number item here. So I'm going to go over to 911. That is the mic PF4 button. And it's marked on the hand mic here as the call button. And I actually want to change that over to enter. That's an extremely convenient way for dialing in frequencies. And while I'm in the menu here, there's one other thing I want to change. I'm going to scroll over to menu 927. Since this unit has the GPS in it, it will set the time automatically, but it won't set the time zone for you. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to my appropriate time zone. Right now in Denver, we're at -7. And if I were to restart the radio and start it back up, it would go ahead and set the hour for me to the correct value. So that's the first thing I want to show on this radio. Any questions on that so far? Or we can dive into front panel programming. All right, very good. Just interrupt me if you have anything. All right. So now I've got my enter key programmed here. And if we could get the wider shot. Whoa, that's a wide shot. Okay. All right, so recall that I just reprogrammed this A button here, the call button, so that it actually functions as an enter button. Right now, I've got PTT and control on the left side of the radio here. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to enter in 146940. And that's the output of one of our favorite Aries repeaters in Region 1, District 6 here locally. One of the really nice things, if you're used to the Chinese radios, the Japanese radios tend to be a little bit higher quality in that they will actually tell you, they will take a good guess at what the repeater shift is supposed to be. So you see right here, there's a minus sign. It's already guessed that this should be a -600 kilohertz shift. If there was anyone on the repeater, we'd already be hearing them. To actually access the repeater, we're going to have to put in a tone. To do that, you first need to turn on the tone function. And of course, there's regular tone, there's CTC, CSS, DCS, and you can do cross tones if you need to transmit and receive different tones. But we're just going to use a regular tone here. To actually change this, I'm going to hit function, and the next button right here is tone select. So you see, we've got the tones here. The tone I want is 103.5. I'm going to press in on the VFO to set that. And actually, we were having some trouble accessing this repeater, but I'll go ahead and switch over to one that we were having more success accessing. So again, I'm going to come over to the hand mic, hit the call button. Since I've reprogrammed that as enter, we're going to go to 449450. Again, it's picked up a minus shift. It knows that that should be a minus 5 megahertz shift. We're going to set the tone on that. Oh, well, like I just said, you actually need to turn on tone first. All right. Now let's set the tone. Okay. And this one we should actually be able to get into, I believe. Oh, someone's already on there. Let's make sure we're not interrupting something here. And before I get too far here, I should also point out that since we're right next to the antenna here in the studio, I'm going to turn down the transmit power. You notice the L right here, you can use high power, which is 50 watts, give or take. Medium power is 10 watts. Low power is 5 watts. Let's go ahead and try and get in there. K0 SWE testing. Looks like that's working.
You did get in.
Excellent. Thanks for confirming, Doug. All right, very good. So we've got these set on the VFO. Now to store these as memories so that we can come back to it later, we're going to hit the function key again. You notice right here, there's a blank triangle right here. That actually indicates that there's nothing stored in memory number 0 right now. So it's safe to go ahead and hit the VFO. I always mix that up. Since this is blank, it's safe to go ahead and hit memory in. They use so many things pressing in the VFO knob that I get used to that. Anyway, so now this is stored, but we are still left in VFO mode. To actually pull that up as a memory, we need to change to memory mode. You notice we've got a 0 here. We're actually on the memory. And since there's only one memory, trying to scroll on the VFO dial, well, there's only one place to go at the moment. So let me switch over here. Notice now, this is on memory number 0, and there's a filled in triangle. So there's something already here. I need to roll this dial over to 1. Now the triangle is open. It's safe to store this as a memory. And again, I'm left in VFO mode. I need to move over to memory mode. That's memory number 1, number 0. And if I roll this VFO dial, now I've got 2 destinations I can get to. All right, so the last thing I want to show as far as front panel programming is how to give these friendly names, because that's always a nice thing to have. So let's go into the main menu. We're going to roll over to menu number 300, which is memories. Actually, I think that's 200. Yeah, okay, it's 200. And 200 right here is called memory name. You won't get this option. You won't get memory name if you're still in VFO mode. So you need to be in memory mode when you come into the main menu. So to give this a memory name, you can use the VFO dial to scroll through here. But I find it much more convenient to use the hand mic here. And it's just like the old feature phones. Let's see, I want to call this A1, sure. Enter that, enter again, and we come back out. It's slightly annoying that you have to come all the way out of the main menu to change to a new memory in order to name it. But it is what it is. Memory name, let's call this B and 2. Now I'll escape out of the main menu. And you notice we've got our friendly names here on the screen now. All right, that is front panel programming. Do we have any questions on that so far? Very good. We can talk just briefly about switching between VFO mode and memory. That's really pretty easy. There's a soft button here for VFO, soft button for memory. You go back and forth. If you hit the function key, you can also move the current memory frequency over to VFO if you just need to get a couple of megahertz, a couple of kilohertz off of your current frequency in memory. All right, well, if that's all we've got on front panel programming, then we can talk briefly about programming programs on the computer. So I've got a couple of memories in here. Let me see if I can pull those off. First program we're going to use here is the stock Kenwood program, which is called MCP-6A, very original. It is free to download. Never mind my strange computer here. I am a nerd by nature, unfortunately. All right, so let me check that my COM port is set correctly here. That looks good. And by the way, this is using a programming cable that does not come with the radio. The model of the programming cable is PG5G, I believe. And the stock cable from Kenwood actually terminates in a serial port DB9 still. But you can find lots of people on eBay, Amazon, your favorite e-commerce website that will sell third-party cables that terminate in a USB-A cable if you no longer have an old style serial port available. And those are generally pretty good to use. All right, so we got the COM port set. Let's try and read from the radio. And this does take a couple of seconds here. You probably noticed that the screen on the radio here actually indicates that it's talking, so you know when that's actually talking with the computer. This is reasonably fast. Not like trying to download DMR contacts. Just memorize all your friends' numbers. Sure. All right, so we got our two memories into here. One of the really nice things about MCP-6A, one of the reasons you should keep it around, is, you know, it's the stock thing from Kenwood. You can get to every nook and cranny of the radio from here. If you have been logging GPS waypoints, you can download those from here, or you can upload waypoints that you want to be able to find. You can do, you know, basically every setting that the radio has available, you can access from here, which is not necessarily true of every program out there. You notice here, there's a call channel function. These are nice if you have sort of a home frequency that you want to be able to press one button and be able to get back to it. I normally set these to the national calling frequencies. What is that? 14652. Help if I could type. And 446000. So those are nice to have. But you can get to all the APRS settings and you don't have to dig through menus, and there are a lot of APRS settings here. And so sometimes it would be nice not to wade through the entire radio on a 4-inch screen. Yes, it is very, very useful if you do know how to do the front panel programming as opposed to relying on the computer if you don't have it available. Any questions on MCP-6A? Or we can switch over to Chirp. All right, let's talk about Chirp. Chirp is kind of an upstart. It's my favorite because it is free and open source software. You can go and modify the code if you are so inclined. They support dozens of manufacturers and hundreds of radios, all with potentially one code plug that runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Has a pretty robust import from CSV. So if you've got a CSV lying around, you don't need to line up all of the columns just so. Chirp will try and help you figure it out. So right now I've got a generic band plan up here. Let me go ahead and, oh, you know what? I bet I need to disconnect that cable from Windows so I can actually use it again. Let's go ahead and download from the radio in Chirp right now and see what we get. And again, this takes a minute. But I will say, if you're anything like Aries R1D6 that has 200 plus channels in our code plug, you probably don't want to be doing all of that through the front panel on this radio. All right, so we have a tab up here that represents what came from the radio. You see we've got the 2 channels that we programmed in. And it's pretty easy for me to just select everything in this generic band plan, come over here to this radio, paste it in. And Chirp is actually warning me that there's a few channels here that are not supported. The generic band plan that I have actually includes a few HF channels, which obviously this radio is not going to support. So Chirp is warning me that it's not going to put those in for me, which is just fine. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And then it's very easy to upload this back. And once this is done, I should have my radio exactly like I used to have it. Any questions on this?
Does Chirp set all of the other menu items like the whole frequencies?
It will set several of them. You notice up here in the corner, there's memories and there's also settings. And it won't let me click on it right this minute. But under the settings tab, you can set many of the same items as you would in MCP-6A, but not necessarily all of them. So I believe you can get to a lot of the APRS settings. You can get to most of what you need. Notably, Chirp will not do firmware updates. So if you're interested in doing firmware updates, use MCP, don't use Chirp. But anyway, this is sort of my favorite pet weird nerd option.
Most of the local area guys are using Chirp.
Are they? Anybody else have experience with Chirp? Or the other one I'll mention is RT Systems. Of course, we've talked a little bit about that. RT Systems is extremely high quality software. Just irks me a little bit that it's an extra $50 per radio. But if you want something that just works every time, RT Systems is a good option, as long as you're willing to pay the money. All right, my radio is back. And it's got all of my favorite channels on it. All right, so we covered those two. Any more comments or discussions about this programming software You find it easier to do it on the computer, easier to do it through the front panel?
There is a question in chat. George W0NFW asks if you have found a good chirp programming manual.
Ooh, this is notorious weak point of free and open source software. I don't know that there is a good manual that covers it. Probably the best reference guide at this point is YouTube or video sites. And at some point we could probably do a deep dive on chirp and exactly how that works, either in this setting or, just get a hold of me, K0SWE, and I'm happy to cover that with individuals or on a group basis.
Next tech talk.
That could be our next tech talk. All right, so with that, we'll get into another topic, scanning. So not everyone is a fan of scanning, but those who like to hear everything love scanning, so let's cover it. Right, keep that down. If you are just dropped into the wilderness and have no idea what is out there, then you probably want to start with VFO scanning. Notice I've changed over to VFO mode here, and I'm just going to hold down the VFO button for a second, and it will start counting up. On 2 meters, this takes a very long time to work through things because of the 5 kilohertz channel spacing. But you can also reverse direction by turning the knob here. It's counting back down, counting back up, if I did it right. Hit the VFO dial again if you want to stop it. If it hears something, it'll stop for, I think, 4 or 5 seconds and then continue on its merry way. That is possible. So the way, I have not actually tried this, by the way. The way the manual described it, it sounds like it would actually scan for the outcoming tone of a repeater, which is probably not what you want if you're trying to get into the repeater. I assume it's possible to reverse and then try scanning for a tone. Good question, but I'd have to refer you back to the manual, unfortunately. All right, so VFO scanning is pretty straightforward. Let's go into memory scanning. Again, just hold the memory function for a moment, and it will start scanning through. Anything that breaks the squelch will make it stop. I seem to be hitting several things here that are just, oh, here we go. If I turn the volume up, we might actually hear one of these. But you notice right here, I'm going through a lot of remote repeaters that I'm never going to be able to hear from here. So what if you want to define a smaller number of channels to try and scan through? Oh, and here's another good example. Whatever, I think it was 449.625 we landed on. That sounds like it's a digital channel. You can actually go into the memory menu. Here, let me stop the scan. You can go into the memory menu here, and if there's a channel that you just don't want to hear ever while you're scanning, you can lock it out. I wish they had called this menu item scan lockout. Every time I come to this cold and I see that lockout, I think it means transmit lockout, but no, it's scan lockout. That's just something to remember. But back to my next topic, what if you want to have a smaller number of memories that you're scanning through? So this is one of the
Hey,
first.
Chris,
Yes.
on your lockout, is there also what we have on our commercial radios of nuisance delete, where it only takes it out until you power cycle the radio or cycle your scan back on and off? A temporary lockout.
I have not seen that.
Okay.
I'm tempted to say no, but I don't know. Maybe it's there and I'm just haven't seen it.
Kenwood does it in their commercial radios, but it's not as common in the ham products, but didn't know if you'd seen it. We'll keep our eyes open.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing that.
Okay,
That does
thank
sound
you.
useful. All right, so if you want to break up your channels, you know, for instance, like I said, we've got 200 plus channels in my Aries code plug. That covers, you know, basically every repeater in a 100-mile radius. It's not going to be very effective for me to try and scan through that as they're laid out. But I can try and group them together by proximity or whatever other criteria I want. And as the slide says, you know, this radio has 1,000 memories. It divides those into 10 groups of 100 memories each. So all of the 100s form a scan group. All of the 200s form a scan group. All of the 0-hundreds form a scan group. And that can let you organize your channels in such a way that scanning through them is actually a, you know, an effective affair. So on the slide here, I have a picture of a map. It's of the Front Range area here. I don't know if it's going to come through on the Zoom video extremely well, but we've got, you know, 3 major metro areas in view on this map here. We've got Fort Collins, Denver, and Colorado Springs. And you can imagine, you probably hear, you know, you probably don't hear a lot of the Colorado Springs repeaters if you're up in Fort Collins. So it might behoove you to put all of your Fort Collins repeaters in your 100s, put all of your Denver repeaters in your 200s, put all of your Colorado Springs repeaters in your 300s. And then you can, you know, really narrow down which memories you're trying to scan through in a particular area. And some of these areas actually overlap. So, you know, Lee Hill, you could probably see that from Fort Collins or from Denver. And so the question becomes, do you want to stick that in your 100s group with your Fort Collins stuff, or do you want to put it in your 200s with your Denver stuff? Well, I would just create a duplicate, make it show up in both groups. And then it's really easy to scan for whatever you can see at the moment. So I thought that was a pretty interesting thing when I figured this out. Any questions on this at the moment? Has anyone used these memory groups this way before?
So if I have these memories in, let's say, the 200s, how do I actually scan just the 200s?
Good point. So if you're, let's come up to, there's probably an easier way to get to a certain channel number, but let's take the 100s, for example. If I'm sitting on one of the 100s channels and I hold in on the VFO button, then it's going to initiate scanning through just the 100s. And once it gets to 199, it's going to roll back around to 100. We probably won't sit through and watch that. Well, we're almost there. Okay. Yeah, you saw it roll around there. So that's scanning through just one group at a time by holding in the VFO knob here. There's also another feature linked to these memory groups here. If you want to have these separate memory groups, but you also want to link them together in interesting ways, there's this group link function. So you can do interesting things like scan the 100s, then scan the 500s, then go back to the 100s because I want to scan those really often, go back to the 600s, go back to the 100s, go back to the 700s. So you can create really interesting patterns where you're dwelling more on some channels than on others. So that's an interesting application of these scan groups as well. All right, well, if we've got no questions on scanning, then I'll move into programmable memories. All right, so these programmable memories, it's a very prominent feature. It's actually got its own soft button right here. It's not even hidden in the menus. And what this does, it stores almost every setting of the radio except for the memory channels. So what good is that, you ask? Well, it stores the beep volume, it stores the APRS settings, it stores almost everything in this main menu here. So it can store GPS settings. So this is a really excellent option if you have multiple people using this same radio. Like in an EOC situation, you've got multiple people who want to have their own preferences dialed into this, or a shared club machine, then you can use programmable memories for that. You can use this if you are moving this radio between different scenarios. So for a while, I was carrying this radio between my desk in my shack and out to my truck. And I had different programmable memory for that. Since you can store separate APRS settings, I kept a separate programmable memory while I was experimenting with the APRS ISS repeater. If you want to hit the International Space Station digipeater, you've actually got to have separate APRS settings. It won't take the wide 1.1 settings in APRS. You've actually got to call out that you're trying to digipeat through the International Space Station. So it was useful for that. The way you get into the programmable memories is hit this button. You've got 5 of these slots, and there's also an off slot. So I consider it like 5.5 programmable memories that you can store here. But we can go, I believe we're in the off setting right now, but we can go into number 1. The radio basically restarts and you've got a blank slate here, other than the memories are still shared. But let's say I've gone into programmable memory 2 here, and I want to change the key beeps so that they're off, because I don't want to hear that in a certain situation. I can actually store that to a programmable memory by hitting my function button, and then this key has changed to PIN, PM-in. And now I've got 1 through 5 on the bottom that are flashing here. I'm going to store that in number 2. If I go back to programmable memory 1, I get my key beeps back. Programmable memory 2, I would expect those to be off. And they are. So that's a good feature for storing a certain set of preferences if you've got multiple situations that you're using the radio or different operators. The Kenwood manual even talks about different times of day. If you want the radio to be silent in the morning for your commute, but you want to listen to it on the way home, then yeah, sure, whatever.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
your technical director back there in the corner, Mark, was telling he's got one of mine units set up where APRS is locked in on one and I have voice on the other. If you save that programmable memory in 1 in that mode, and then 2, you turn APRS off, that would that be an effective way to change modes? Things like GPS, APRS, is remembered across PM1 and 2.
Right. So that would be an effective way to switch between those. If you want APRS to be on sometimes and you want to switch it off, then that's a perfect way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any more questions about programmable memories? We can switch into what I'm sure is a hot topic for everybody, APRS. For the uninitiated, APRS is the Automated Packet Reporting System. It was originally called the Automated Position Reporting System, and one of the best things it still does is to broadcast your position out to other users of the APRS system. But these days it does more than that. It does messaging. There are gateways that will let you send SMS to a cell phone. There's gateways that will let you send an email out to just a general email user. There are limitations to those systems. I don't think you can receive back that way, but at least you could get something out using APRS. What I've got prepared for you is just setting up APRS beaconing, but we can walk through that. And then if you would like to go into more detail, there's plenty of resources for that. All right, so I've got the APRS frequency programmed up here. Here it is. So the US APRS frequency that all of us should be using is 144.390 simplex. If you're in another country, then obviously the frequency is going to be different. Go ahead and contact your national club and ask them. So we've got the frequency here, but there's a couple other things that we need to do before we can actually use APRS. We'll need to head into the menu system and go into APRS here. Basic settings, we're going to need to set up our call sign because that is sent out with every APRS packet. And this is what constitutes as our IDing for the FCC purposes. I'm going to put in my ID, K0 SWE. And the other thing that you can put in here is called an SSID. If you run multiple devices that use APRS, you want to be able to distinguish between them. So you put a dash and then a number. I usually keep this one as -9. And there's a chart out there for the recommended SSIDs that you should use in a given situation. A -9 is a pretty typical one for mobile. -7, I believe, is portable. -10, I forget, but you can use just your bare call sign if it's sort of your main station. For these purposes, I'm going to go ahead and use -9. Let's come back to the top of this menu. There are just a mess of settings in here that are worth exploring, but I want to jump to one particular, which is, well, let's go ahead and point out the station icon. When you're sending out an APRS beacon with your position, you can actually set how this is going to show up if someone is using a mapping program. So it defaults as a Kenwood icon, but you can use quite a number of different icons here. I tend to set mine as a, let's set it as a truck. Oh, there was one other setting that I wanted to point out in here, which is the packet path. This is very important for how wide you're going to send your APRS information. This defaults to a pretty good setting, which is that it's going to go through 2 hops. similar to repeaters in the voice world, with APRS, you can use digipeaters, which are going to store the packet, which are going to store a packet that you sent out, and it's going to forward it on. And it will actually send it out, forward it on multiple hops if you let it. And you can set this really high, and you're going to get it way out there, and you're going to bog down the system. So 2 is probably a good place to start. I'll mention this is, if you're going to try and do the International Space Station, if you're going to try and use their digipeater, then you've actually got to set this to a custom value, which probably you'd set it to others. And then I forget exactly what the, maybe it's A's or R0 ISS or something like that is the digipeater destination that you would need to set in this packet path. But for now, we're going to leave it on 2 hops, which is wide 1.1, wide 2.1. Now to actually enable this, right now we've got it on GPS, so it's going to send out our current position. If you've got the older unit that does not have GPS, or if you're just in a stationary position where you always want to send out the same lat long, you can set that specifically through the menus. But to turn this on with GPS going, I'm going to come here to this, I'm going to hit the key button. It's got the APRS options down here. This button is not for bacon, it is for beacon. Oh, there's one other setting I forgot. Here's the digipeat setting. Imagine if we just turn that on, we could be a digipeater. Very good. All right, where is, here it is, Beacon TX algorithm. So using this menu option, you can set out when a beacon is going to be sent out. Right now we've got it set to manual, so every time I hit that bacon button, it's going to send out a packet. Pretty often, if you're just driving around, you'd rather set this to auto. And there's actually, I believe auto is just a timer thing. There's also a method called smart beaconing, which will try and detect when you're turning in your vehicle, and will try and send out beacons on a smart basis for however smart it is. And you can try and tune how often it's going to do that. But I'm going to come back out here. I'm going to hit set the bacon button. I'm still missing something, aren't I? Oh, I haven't TNC. I need to turn on the APRS TNC. Now I can hit bacon. And I believe if you watch closely, it's going to go on air as soon as I hit this. Yep, there we go. So when it goes on air, it's actually sending out my position. And if you go onto a website called aprs.fi, you'll probably be able to actually look me up.
So the flashing GPS icon, does that mean it's working, or does it mean it's not working?
Flashing GPS does mean it has a good fix. If it is stationary, then it's still looking for a fix.
And then we've got another question for Bray, NB0P. Is there a GPS module to retrofit older rigs?
There is, and John says he's actually done that before. Oh.
Yes, there is a retrofit GPS module that is made for that unit. It's a little cube. It's about 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches. It has 2 RJ45s on it, and a piece of Velcro comes with it. And it's essentially to mount in line with the cable at the control head. And then there's a data cable that comes out of that, which is a sub-mini jack, and it plugs into the side of the radio into the sub-mini GPS input on the old style radio. It works fine. It's just a little clunky and clumsy.
looks like we got a question in chat.
There is another question from Gregory Deemer. Where in MCP-6A do we program the APRS frequency, and do we need to use a memory channel?
Good question. You should use a memory channel. And actually, the APRS settings are going to try to apply to whatever memory channel you're currently on. Let me pull up the APRS settings here. Oh, I've already got it up. Okay, so you're not going to set the frequency in these APRS settings. You're going to set your call sign, you're going to set your icon, and you can also set, let's see, here's the packet path. I'm looking for the TX algorithm. It's in here if you look around. Actually, here it is. Here's the TX algorithm. So you can set it to manual. It can send out whenever you PTT. It can set it out on a timer, or it can do smart beaconing. So this APRS menu is where you set up sort of the global APRS settings. And then, yes, you do need to use a memory channel to store the frequency. I do want to keep moving on unless we got a question readily available.
It's also important to remember to switch off the TNC when you change channels, because you can't receive audio when the TNC is on, but you're on a different channel.
Yes, that's true. So if I change this to one of my voice channels, but I've still got APRS running, that's not going to do me very much good right now. This is going to prevent me from using this channel right now. I better hit TNC and yep. And often enough, you'll hear that on repeaters. Someone forgot to turn off their APRS, and you get packet squawking coming in.
And I know it kind of alludes to, something a little more to Doug's question, because you can actually lock it when you pick a personality, and in order to keep you from accidentally doing that, you can set up a personality, have APRS, have the frequency locked. So what you don't have to touch it on the front panel and end up sending out APRS beacons on Colorado Connection, for example.
Here's another question.
How to win friends and influence people.
Here's another question from Walt, AB0, Victor Z. What should the UDigi menu 618 be set to? UI Digi. Thanks for keeping me honest, John.
Good question. I actually have not used the DigiPeter, so I couldn't tell you. Anyone know off the top of their head?
It should be off, but UI trace 620 should be turned on.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like that's what it came up with from factory settings. So hopefully that's a good thing. All right, real quick, I know there was a question that we wanted to cover crossband repeat. So let's try and cover that real quickly here. If I've got my notebook, I've got a couple of simplex frequencies that we could use. So let's hit VFO. I will mention with the crossband repeater here, it's actually crossband. It will work UHF to VHF. You can't do both of them on UHF. You can't do both of them on VHF. It has to be one to the other. But it's pretty easy to set up here. We're going to go to simplex 146400. And on this side, we want to use simplex 4457. Oh, I'm still in memory mode. I need to be in VFO. 445700. Okay, let's turn tones off. Okay, so we got our 2 simplex frequencies, and I want to move this down to low power. And the way to enable the, well, before I do that, I should say one thing. Since you're running a repeater here, you need to go into the menus and you need to set your ID. You need to actually send out your call sign in Morse code per FCC. So I'm going to go ahead and set mine in here. K0SWE. You want to be legal. You've got the option to send this out in Morse code, or if you have the optional voice module, you can send that out. I don't have that, so I'm going to choose Morse. And to actually turn on the crossbanding, I'm going to turn the unit off. I'm going to hold this 3rd button here and turn it back on. And you notice most of the controls are now locked out. I can't do anything with this radio except turn the physical volume knobs and squelch knobs. And I can't change channels. I can turn it off. But that's basically all I can do with the radio right now. So it's actually set up as a crossband repeater right now. If I had my HTs handy, I would show you that it works, but I've got a separate video on YouTube that actually shows that.
So I have a question. So I know with, you know, with some of the Kenwood handhelds, and to be able to control this, can you touch tone this on or off, or have any control over this from your handheld when you're in remote operation, whether to turn it off or to turn it on?
So I've done just a tiny bit of research on Kenwood. They call it Sky Command is their remote stuff. I know you can touch tone certain things. I don't know if you can actually turn it on, turn it off with Sky Command. Anyone know that off the top of their heads? Hearing none. Other questions about crossbanding on this radio? It's a neat feature.
I guess my comment is, to get on my soapbox, crossband is a cool feature, but if you're going to do it, please talk to the trustee of the repeater you're crossbanding to, if you're not running on simplex, and make sure it's okay, because you are involving their station and ultimately their repeater output, Morse ID. Just talk to the trustee if you're going to do it, please.
Yeah, excellent recommendation. Thank you.
So I guess the bottom line question is, this is a radio that runs on sale $500. Is it worth it?
I think it's worth it. I use this extensively for AX25 packet radio. We did not get a chance to get around to that. It really deserves its own tech talk because it's a hefty subject on its own.
And it will actually do both 1200 and 9600 baud.
Yes, it will.
And one of my favorites is I like a green screen. And that's one thing that this radio, you can switch the screen to a different color if you so desire.
Yes. It's a very handsome radio. It's nice having the separate head unit. The head unit, unfortunately, will not clip to the radio body if you're used to that, but you know, I can certainly live without that. Other questions, comments? Was this useful? Was this informational?
That was a great inaugural talk, and you've just been voluntold that the next tech talk will be on using chirp, and the third tech talk will be on using this radio.
You're going to see more of me than you ever wanted to. Very good. Anything else from the group?
You want to just tell people your contact information again, please?
Sure. My call sign is K0SWE. You can reach me by email at K0SWE arrl.net. I am in many of the local clubs, so you can get my contact information that way. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you again. It was very informative. And I've had this radio for 10 years and I learned something. Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us. And our next RMHAM University is on January the 6th, which is a Saturday morning. And it will be,
So we have a comment here from Chris, 8U5 IT. Are there additional capabilities we don't have time to talk about, but deserve attention later on?
AX25 packet is probably the big one. This will do Echolink sysop if you're into that. Yeah, there's quite a few features that we didn't even get to touch on.
Great, thank you very much. And just a reminder, our next Tech Talk is by James Cizik on January the 6th, and he will be talking about batteries, everything you ever wanted to know about batteries, and also things that you shouldn't do to batteries. So we're looking forward to that. And then, of course, later in January, we'll have some more Tech Talks. Please keep an eye on the RMHAM website, and we'll keep you all posted. Thank you all for joining us, and wish you all a very prosperous 2021.